Call to order the June 3rd Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission. And just note for the record that all commissioners are present. Future agenda items. Commissioner Nocita.
I am interested in following up on Commissioner Walter's interest in adopting some sort of standards for procurement if this board is in fact the Public Contracting Review Board for the Urban Renewal Agency. So I'd like to put that on a future agenda.
Okay. Anything else? Commissioner.
We've had discussions on several occasions whether we need to look at projects that, I should say, grant contributions at a greater level than we do for special designs, and I think we need to take a look at that question. Our minimum course is $10,000, but if there are certain ones that come forward that meet some important needs in terms of the Urban Renewal Agency area.
May I suggest on that one, what we've got coming is Main Street Oregon City coming up with some design standards and a grading criteria to help, for us to look at.
Okay.
They're suggesting a work session and then maybe taking action the next meeting. And that seems like an appropriate thing to deal with at that time.
Okay, very
if
good.
Everybody's in agreement. Any other agenda items? Do we do these when? Okay. They're for later. Okay. Discussion items. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Cove. Mr. Patterson.
Yes. Chairman Clack, members of the board, I believe this issue came up at the the City Commission's work session, and the Commission had asked that this, first indicated this was an urban renewal issue and asked that we bring forth, or see if we could get a representative to come and talk with the board about the issue of shading and fish in the cove. And Ms. Bankhead did spend some time and look for a contact. She had initially called Cindy Boxstadler of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department, and then she referred us on to the state, indicating this was a state issue, and at that point we contacted Todd Ellsberg, and I believe he's here this evening, I think. And so anyhow, he said he would come and discuss that issue with you. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ellsberg.
Thanks for coming.
You bet. Thank you. Chair Slack, Commissioners, for the record, my name is Todd Alsbury. I'm the District Fish Biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife in Clackamas. My area of management covers the Sandy, Clackamas, and Moala rivers, as well as the lower Willamette River. It's primarily managing fisheries, setting regulations, reviewing habitat permits, and land use review. I have a short presentation for you today to look at some of the habitat conditions or benefits that the cove does provide to fish and wildlife as well in the riparian area around the cove. As far as fish habitat goes, the cove does provide off-channel refuge during winter months primarily. This can extend out into fall and spring for all native fish species found in the Clackamas River. That's all native fish species, and it includes salmonids, salmon and steelhead, ESA listed, steelhead, coho, and chinook. All could use this cove for a certain time of the year, primarily during winter months or when flows are high. They'll utilize off-channel habitat. Rearing habitat for these ESA-listed salmon and steelhead is very limited in the lower Clackamas and Willamette rivers. The late spring and early fall water temperatures does limit rearing potential. So about this time of year, as water temperature in the Clackamas increases, it starts to increase in the cove as well. And it's very likely that by July, the water temperature in the cove exceeds 70 degrees, which isn't really conducive to rearing for salmonids, and much higher than that, and it's actually could be fatal. So fish tend to avoid, or salmonids tend to avoid, that type of habitat, and it kind of converts to more of a warm water fish habitat where we have bass, crappie, catfish, and possibly even walleye that move into there. Provides good conditions for warm water fish and warm water angling. There are a lot of anglers that like to come into the cove during summer months to fish for bass and crappie. Adult salmon and steelhead are also occasionally harvested by anglers fishing in the cove during high water events in late winter and early spring. It's usually when the Willamette River is up in backwaters into the Clackamas that we get Willamette run fish that actually move into the Clackamas, and then we'll go into the off-channel habitats that the cove does provide. And anglers know that, and they go in and they'll start to troll around in a big circle in the cove, and occasionally they do well. ODFW did recently discontinue acclimation of spring Chinook in the cove. We've moved these fish to Carver Park, where we now acclimate them because we feel that we'll get better survival for those fish when we rear and release them upstream as opposed to the cove. The cove, it was intended to provide fisheries basically at the mouth and below the mouth of the Clackamas, not necessarily in the cove because it's not a unique water source that fish return to. So the fish that did come into the cove were likely just fish that were straying out of the Willamette or potentially cove fish, but that project was really to provide fisheries for the Willamette, Meldrum Bar, and areas below. The riparian trees surrounding the cove do provide shade, overhead cover, and a source of large woody debris that can be recruited in the future into the cove, which is the critical component of juvenile rearing habitat for salmonids. It's not only to have shallow water that remains cool, but also is complex with wood that falls down, and it provides hiding or cover habitat in particular when warm water fish do forage in that area. It's critical that we have small hiding places for those fish to go into. The presence of mature trees provides shade around the shallow margin of the cove. The cove does get, I believe, 10 plus feet deep, not much deeper. But the shallow areas 0 to 4 feet deep are where we're going to find our salmonids. Juvenile salmonids likely utilize shallow nearshore areas during high winter flows. That doesn't mean they're not going to be distributed throughout the cove, but typically they would hug around the shorelines. Warm water fish may pose a short-term threat to rearing native fish in late spring and early fall. This is at a time period when they overlap in presence, and warm water fish are actually increasing their foraging as the water warms up. Most of our salmonids will move out and then wouldn't be predated upon by warm water fish, but in both seasons there is a small overlap where they could be. This photo was basically taken just to demonstrate, and it's kind of hard to see from the shading already, but under the cottonwoods that are hanging over right there, there's a completely shaded nearshore area that extends out about 10 feet from the shore. And that is primarily where you're going to find fish that rear in the cove. This is a time of year when the water temperature is probably increasing upwards of 60 and in shallow areas of the cove could actually exceed 70 degrees. So what we're looking at is if we didn't have the riparian vegetation, the water temperature likely increasing faster to a point where it's not conducive to salmonids a little earlier in the year. So it at some point, just because of the temperature in the Clackamas is going to, or just direct sunlight, is going to easily exceed 70 degrees. But that may happen earlier if we don't have shading around the shallow margin in particular. This is looking just across the cove to look at the larger area of the cove where people, in spring months again, will troll around in a large circle. And then all around the cove at this point, even when the sun was basically directly overhead, there is a shaded portion around most of the perimeter of the cove. There is also, of course, wildlife habitat in and surrounding the cove provided by the mature trees and shrubs that provide habitat for several Oregon Conservation Strategy species. The birds would include heron, osprey, and bald eagle, primarily foraging habitat, not necessarily nesting habitat. Migratory, or at least no nests have been found in the area. Migratory songbirds, nesting and foraging, small amphibians, salamanders, frogs, turtles, basking on logs around the shoreline. The Oregon Conservation Strategy is an effort to use best available science to create a broad vision and conceptual framework for long-term conservation in Oregon. So it's not regulatory, it's just our effort to make a long-term vision of how we want to conserve species in Oregon, and there are several species that do occupy the perimeter around the cove that are included in our conservation strategy. And again, this just looks at the mature trees, cottonwoods surrounding the cove that can provide habitat or perching habitat for predatory birds that may feed on the fish that are in the cove, as well as habitat for migratory birds. And that would be it. I'll take any questions.
Commissioner? No, Neely.
There's a design for development going in that's actually planning to cut back those trees, do some soil work, and you probably know about it. The plantings there, I think, will ultimately produce a better riparian habitat than we've got here there currently. I made a statement a couple of commission meetings ago that I thought the cove, in fact, was major rearing habitat. I didn't think it was a major cold water refuge. And the thing is, you mentioned the debris piece. And are there ways for trees that we remove in the cove that we could actually use at least some of those trees within the cove itself to provide the kind of structural habitat you were talking about without worrying about them floating off into areas where we may have kayak activities and so forth? Are there mechanisms that we can deal with this? Of course, there is a tide operating in the cove and so forth. I was wondering what those possibilities might be.
Chair Slack, Commissioner Neely. It's challenging because, in particular, the mature riparian trees provide a function that replanting, revegetation after they're cut just couldn't provide for a number of years. Mm-hmm. So that's the primary problem with cutting those down, is that you lose the function that there's no doubt you could probably provide or create a better riparian habitat long ways down the road if it's maintained and you do have a good adequate planting, but that could be 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Mm-hmm. It is possible, and we do oftentimes look for, say like in forestry projects where they're cutting timber upstream, that they put some of that wood in the stream to make up for what would be lost. Typically, those are coniferous trees, not cottonwoods, because cottonwoods will decay quickly. In particular, if you do have tidal kind of drying, wetting of the trees, we may only get 2-4 years of function before they decay. So, we would be looking at things like conifer trees that would have to be brought in, and they could be fixed in place, but again, the real piece is having those trees, mature trees there that fall down naturally and then are replaced by, second regeneration that's, in the understory. So,
Commissioner Crocker.
Pardon my ignorance, but is cottonwood a native species?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Crocker, yes, it is.
Okay.
Black cottonwood.
So those would grow natively around that?
You bet.
Cove.
They grow very well.
Commissioner Nacita.
A couple of questions. First, I know this is a DEQ regulatory operation, but there was recently an established TMDL for the lower Willamette, including, I guess, it goes up some of the tributaries of the Willamette, such as the Clackamas, and part of that TMDL is temperature regulation. Do you know whether that TMDL, and again, you're not DEQ, so, but we don't have DEQ here. Do you know if that TMDL addresses temperature through the issue of riparian vegetation?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Nocita, I'm pretty confident that the Clackamas itself is 303D listed for temperature. If it isn't, the Willamette is, and that would require a TMDL that does require riparian enhancement to meet the whatever the requirement that DEQ does have. The Clackamas currently does exceed what is suitable for salmonids starting in about mid-June. I think it starts to exceed their criteria. So.
Okay.
For most of this, you tell us what the MTL means.
What's that?
What the initials you've used, the acronym.
Oh, TMDL, total maximum daily load. I don't know what the other one was that I used. I apologize.
So we don't have
He was using it, and you were
Second question related to worst-case scenarios. Right now, the plan shows complete removal of the cottonwoods on the east and south side of the Cove project. The redevelopment plans show replantings, but on the west side, the plantings are in clumps, and they're basically between the condominium buildings, I presume to allow unobstructed views from the condos to the Cove.
East side.
East side, I'm sorry. So there will no longer be, in the current plan, that tree wall of cottonwoods to provide the shading. Under the worst-case scenario, what are the potential impacts to the fish in the Cove from unobstructed sunlight into the Cove on the east side from where those cottonwoods would be removed if there were just no sunbreak there?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Nocita, it's challenging to answer. One, because I'm not very familiar with the specifics of the plan, either where the condos will be located or what vegetation specifically will be removed. So I kind of have an idea of where you're at in the Cove, but essentially what I think, what I feel would happen, and this is just a judgment call based on my, it's my opinion. Removing the trees is going to shorten the amount of time that's suitable, that makes the Cove suitable for rearing. It's not suitable when water temperature increases in the Clackamas, and that could naturally occur. Even without all the development up the Clackamas, it increases temperature. But what we may do is narrow the time that it becomes suitable, and that's critical because we're already short of quality rearing habitat in the Clackamas, and if we reduce either eliminate or shorten the amount of time that habitat is available to fish, we're going to affect fish that are already listed. We have a number of actions identified in our recovery plan that are, hopefully going to get us on a trajectory where we would recover these fish and they wouldn't be listed. And the fear is that any incremental, reduction in that is going to affect. And this is a minor, it's a small amount of habitat in relation to the entire Clackamas River, but we are talking about listed fish that we're trying to remove from the Endangered Species Act or the listings. So any impact is something that we want to avoid.
Just as a follow-up, what historically has caused the amount of habitat in the lower Clackamas and Willamette rivers to become so rare?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Nocita, it's basic simplification of the river, and that's what we do to straighten, to armor, to dike, to prevent the river from doing what it naturally wants to do. And a perfect example is the Cove, where in the past there was a large riprap wall placed to prevent the river from capturing the Cove. There were reasons why it was placed to prevent the capture, because that's a former gravel pit, I believe. So there was probably some reasons why we didn't necessarily want to allow that to happen, although it's hard for us to say that we want to prevent the river from doing what it wants to do, and we regularly do that. What we are doing in the Clackamas right now is actually opening those side channels and making them available to rearing fish, and when we do, they fill it up, and they do very well. We're looking at probably half of the off-channel rearing habitat that was historically in the Clackamas. So if we only have half there and we're trying to recover fish, any reduction or any loss is not going to get us in the right direction.
Commissioner Norris.
Thank you. You mentioned the fact that one way to assure habitat was to leave the mature trees. So if you were in the position, as we are, of looking at a development, what other methods or procedures could you come up with, or give us advice to make that a better habitat or to ease the transition to development?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Norris. Unfortunately, removal of riparian trees is the most difficult to mitigate directly to offset. And I wouldn't say mitigate, but to offset the impacts. Say for removing, trees that provide a source of large woody debris, you can take a tree and put it in, and you replace that. But the function that the tall, mature tree that's 100-plus feet provides just can't be replaced by nearly anything that we do, because you'll still allow the water temperature to increase, which is the key component that mature tree provides. So I really don't know of anything that could offset, with the exception of selective removal, potentially. There are places where there are patches of trees where it's fairly thick. Not that we want to leave one row of trees that only provides the shade to the stream or to the cove, because then that doesn't provide the benefits to wildlife that would be by larger clumps of trees. So, it's if there's an opportunity for selective removal or keeping areas that are shaded that remain cool. Again, not knowing the specifics of the plan, it's hard for us to recommend specific action. And I think there's been a lag of time between when this may have initially been proposed and also changed in both our wildlife and fish biologists. So if at all possible, I think we'd like to be re-engaged to try and look more at the specifics of the project to see how we could potentially offset some of those impacts, if it's possible.
Commissioner Crocker? Oh, I'm sorry, were you done? Okay, sorry.
Are there any benefits to any man-made structures that may go on the cove? So if there's docks or any of those types of man-made structures, do fish use those for cover and shade?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Crocker. The warm water fish would love to have the dock to perch under, and anglers would love to have the dock to cast a lure under to probably catch a bass. The problem becomes when we look at the lower Willamette River and the number of docks and overhead structures that there are that are basically places for warm water fish to pick off salmonids. If you don't have complexity, if you don't have places for those fish to hide, there's no place for them to escape. So the warm water fish will come in and have a much better time at foraging because they have the cover of the dock to provide shade. And if juvenile salmonids are coming in and also using that, what we've asked for or looked for in the past is to try to add the complexity or put root wads and things like that in and around the dock so they're hiding places for fish. And that's challenging to do because you look at bringing boats in and out and other debris collecting on that material, and it just doesn't, it's not a very favorable idea, I guess, for whoever wants to build the dock.
Commissioner Shaw was next.
I think this might go to Mr. Patterson. I didn't bring my Urban Renewal Bible with me tonight here, so I'm trying to remember what the history is. Was this studied before? Was this in some documentation about a study habitat? All this before for this whole project? Or is this new information here?
This, I think, had been part of the work that PPS did, but I'd have to look back because it's been a while since I've looked at that as well. But we can get you that information and bring it forward. Unless, Nancy, are you familiar with that, Dan?
That's my understanding, too, is that PPS took a look at it. But they're not a reviewing agency as far as the planning process, so there's not a formal review that we would have gotten from them.
Chair Slack, sorry, if I may speak to that. We did review at least the bank stabilization project along the river itself that protected the cove, and either that was 2000 or 2001, we do have 2 letters on file that we provided speaking to the benefits of the riparian trees around the cove. I spoke to Terry and mentioned that I would provide those to you guys if they're not already in the files. Commissioner Neely.
You were referring to warm water fish. Many of them, of course, are not indigenous. Is that right?
Chair Slack, Commissioner Neely, you're correct. Most of them, the bass, crappie, bluegill, catfish, walleye, are all non-native. We have a challenge as a fisheries agency to provide opportunities to anglers in Oregon as well, and one of those opportunities is provided by warm water fish. So we do look at creating opportunities for warm water fishing, but we don't do it where it's contrary to cold water fish recovery. So there are warm water anglers that would love to have a dock in there, and they go around the sheriff's dock, and that's where they catch their bass. But again, the more dock or overhead structures that we have, the more I think predation that we're going to unfortunately see.
Commissioner Neely.
I was going to ask, of course, the cove, because it's almost a round structure, it's got a lot of surface area that isn't shaded. I presume that it isn't the greatest of cold water refuges in any case. Is that right?
Yeah, Chair Slack, Commissioner Neely, it doesn't provide the best. It does provide adequate habitat when the river floods, and that's when most fish are moving. They'd love to go into the cove where it's basically the water's not moving, and then they'll rest as we're flushed down the river from high waters. So they do utilize that habitat typically for short periods, because they'll just rest as the water drops back down. Those fish might, either use the edges or drop into the Willamette. But as long as it's cool, there will be fish that would use the shoreline. But as soon as it warms up, it would be rare that, one, we have fish moving down the Clackamas that would move into it, but they would probably avoid it because it's warmer, I think, than the Clackamas is itself.
Commissioner Nocita.
And you had mentioned in your slide presentation that you no longer use the cove for juvenile coho. What happened? What was the reason for that?
Yeah, Chair Slack, Commissioner Nocita, we decided that the project, and we had monitored it through creel surveys and collecting coated wire tags from the fish's snouts, that the majority of the fish that were released from that site tended to stray, because they didn't have a unique water source like the Clackamas to come back to, and then we could get the fish in the Clackamas and prevent them from going, to some other river system. So knowing that those fish don't return and they provided to the fishery 1 in 5 years. So it didn't really produce good numbers of returning adults. We felt that we could move those fish up to a new acclimation pond at Carver Park on Clackamas County property, where we now acclimate fish in an above-ground pond, 150,000. It's spring chinook, actually, that we do. We don't do coho. I think in the past we had acclimated steelhead in the cove, but essentially it was determined that it didn't work. The fish may have returned and they were caught in the Willamette, but not as high as a rate as fish released, say, from Clackamas hatchery.
Okay, Commissioner Norris.
Well, just to sort of sum up, I guess, if we're ready to move into comments a little bit. It's a very interesting dilemma. We agree that the cove is a degraded area, but it has some very rich resource and habitat potential. We all appear to agree that the change of the edge would provide greater habitat. It's just that 20 years in the middle that it seems like that's the problem that we need to address, since there's agreement on both extremes. So I think that's probably where we need to then engage the developers and find out exactly how we can work together.
Commissioner Nocita.
Nuance that from my own perspective, that I don't think even if we waited 20 years, again, that the replantings would provide the same habitat protection as is currently, because in the design, the trees that will grow high are only being planted in clumps between the condominium projects, and the part of the shoreline directly in front of each condominium will remain unshaded, and there will be direct sunlight onto the cove where it is now shaded by very tall cottonwoods.
Commissioner Neely.
Now, I would suggest that, assuming the development goes forward, that we look very critically at the south bank of the cove. My understanding, we're intending to move the Main Street back from the cove site and actually get a significant grove established there, because it is on the south side, and I think it could contribute greatly to shading in the long term. But I agree with your statement. I mean, that the intention of building those is partially for a view of the cove for the residents, and I don't think that the developers would be interested in having a lot of large trees blocking that view, and I think you're quite correct.
I have one question, just for my own clarification. I wasn't really clear with how many endangered fish were really going to impact. I mean, I somehow heard you say that any amount was probably a problem, but I mean, that really didn't quantify from my, I mean, because if we're talking about 10 fish, it seems like, wow, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If we're talking about 1 million fish, it may be different. And so I'm not really clear on kind of where we're at there. So.
Sure. Chair Slack, again, a challenging question to answer, because we don't honestly know how many fish use the cove. We know they do use the cove because we've seen them on the shallow water perimeter. There are 3 listed fish species, Chinook salmon, coho salmon, and steelhead, all of which spawn, 100% of them spawn above this site. So all juveniles are going to go by the cove. A certain percentage of those, and again, 5 to 10%, may go into the cove, may spend some time in the cove. The number of those that are impacted or could be impacted by removal of the trees is some percentage of those fish that would go into the cove. And again, we might have 400,000 juvenile fish that exit the Clackamas in a year. So those are the kind of numbers that we're playing with.
So, and in reality, is the worst case scenario, I mean, are these fish going to die if we don't have that habitat, or are they going to go back into the Clackamas and go upriver?
More than likely, they're going to seek another habitat.
Right.
And again, it provides a challenge for fish, because they're constantly looking for suitable habitat, and as we further reduce the amount of suitable habitat, that creates pressure on them.
Okay.
So it's not going to likely be a direct loss, unless we start talking about docks and things like that. They're going to provide, the areas for warm water fish to forage. You could talk about direct, effects on fish, from consumption, but it's hard to say that removing the trees is going to directly take any fish.
Okay.
It's going to make them move somewhere else, which is an impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Neely.
We've got some on-bearing streams going through Oregon City, and we have stretches in Oregon City where there just isn't that many trees. Part of it is because of development and the steep banks, but I think there are probably mitigation opportunities and sites that are probably better for salmonids, and I think we ought to look at those.
Okay, do we have any, we've got a lot on the agenda tonight, and I want to be, I want to take into account people who've come out for other things on the agenda here. So do we have any more discussion or questions that...
Just one statement he made on this slide. In fact, it's not in one of the trees, but there's an osprey nest that exists off the cove within 500 feet. It's been there the total time I've lived in Oregon City, 20 years. Every single year it's produced flying young. 2 years ago, 3 young birds flew from that nest. It's a
Not
very,
not in a tree, however.
huh?
It's not in a tree.
It's not in a tree, but
Not to talk about
that's
utility
true.
pole.
Telephone
But
pole.
but it was utility pole, but
but
it does,
is
the
that
point
man-made?
is, it does fish the cove.
Oh, yes, yes.
Well, I'm sure you're aware of the one that's trying to perch on the utility pole right next to Oregon 43.
Okay, Commissioner, Mr. Patterson, upgraded you there. Huh?
I
Or
just
demo.
want to thank Mr. Alsbury for coming out
Yes.
and visiting with us this evening. Appreciate him.
Thank you
taking
very
time
much.
to do
Thank
that,
you.
so.
I have a suggestion. I suggest that this policy issue agenda item we hold over for our next meeting, if that's okay. Again, I want to allow folks who have come out for issues that they've got on the docket to.
Well, we can just take it up after the.
If we have time.
the grants, if we have time.
We got the budget thing, so. Commissioner Nocita? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm Randy Tyler.
Yes.
Randy.
Yep.
Randy Tyler with Pacific Property. Don't want to influence your agenda at all, but we're here in case you might have any further questions, or we have some additional information that we could provide. And if this is not the best time to do it, that's fine. I do have John Van Staveren here, who was the author of the water quality resource assessment. And as a developer proposing a development, we are required to prepare that document. John Van Staveren was the author of that document and has some pretty good knowledge about the cove and all the environmental aspects of it.
And that would speak to the question that Commissioner Shaw was asking about.
Should we go ahead and, okay. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, all right, good. One of the things that's worth noting, is this portable?
Yep.
Is that the area along the east side of the cove has been described as one tree in width. There's a very narrow band of vegetation along this eastern cove. Now, the people who originally did your water survey were Walker Macy, landscape architects. They rated, this was several years ago, they rated the quality of the habitat in this area. The only area that rated good habitat was the peninsula here and the peninsula here. All the rest of these areas were rated as either fair or poor. And you can see why. It's a former industrial use, it's only one tree wide, and it really doesn't make much of a habitat. What we're proposing to do, and have got the approvals from the Planning Commission so far to proceed, is to take this bank is very steep. It's actually dangerous. There's places out here, particularly over in this area, where if you went over the edge, you'd be all the way to the bottom. It's actually somewhat of a dangerous situation. But we're going to cut this bank back to a more gentle slope. Right now, it's very steep, and so there's a lot of runoff and there's erosion. When we make that bank more flat, it slows the water down. We can do some biofiltration. We will revegetate the area with native species and increase the size of the habitat by maybe 6 times what it is now, because right now it's very, very narrow. So we're going to do all those things to increase the habitat. We're not going to touch the areas that were rated as good. We're only going to be working in those areas that have been rated as degraded. So I wanted to pass that along and then introduce John Van Staveren and let him make a few comments.
Commissioners, Chairman Slack. Yeah, my name is John Van Staveren with Pacific Habitat Services. And what Randy said is true, and what Todd said is true, and it is a dilemma. We've worked on this project now for quite a while. Do you know the Cove? And it is a very narrow riparian area, and that's one of the reasons why we said it was fair to degrade it. No doubt about it, we have some mature trees there that do provide habitat. They are on the east side. We actually have worked with DEQ and with many jurisdictions in the area doing TMDL temperature modeling, and the areas to the south and to the south and the west are where you want your riparian vegetation as far as shade goes. and then to the east and the north, it's less important. It's still important in a microclimate sense, there's no doubt about that. But in the overall scheme of things, it's really on the south and the west side that you want to focus. So it is a dilemma. As Randy said, it is steep. It's one width wide, the riparian area. It was an old gravel quarry. You can see it was that. In fact, I would say it is not a well-reclaimed gravel quarry. We did the work for Ross Island Sand and Gravel, and we went through that project. Much scrutiny, and we came up with a plan that was accepted by everyone. Very gentle slopes and lots of riparian vegetation, because it is important for sure. And it took a long-term view of the habitat. Todd, great respect for Todd, does a great job. We've worked with him for many years. He knows his fisheries biology like no one. As he said, lots of warm water fish in there. The salmonids do use it during high water areas. It's a great off-channel habitat. I guess the only thing I would say is that I would question is whether the fish would actually move out of there due to the temperature, because when the warm water fish, when the salmonids are in there, they tend to be out of there anyway, because when the salmonids are in there during the wintertime, the water temperatures are cool. When it starts to heat up, and Todd said this, they start to move out. That's when the riparian vegetation really plays a key role. You may have juveniles, and there's been studies now that really changed our thinking about juveniles and how they are using these near-shore areas. How important they are, I don't know. I'm not a fisheries biologist, and obviously Todd is, so he could explain that better than I could. But I guess I question the importance of the cove as a salmonid habitat during the warmer periods when riparian vegetation is really going to be important. Again, it is an issue, though, and I do like Commissioner Neely's idea about mitigation. There are certainly degraded habitats throughout the region. Perhaps there's some other mitigation we can do in a salmonid-bearing stream that would have more immediate impact. And, I'm speaking for the developer, I don't know, but we do many restoration projects throughout the Pacific Northwest, and I know that you can have some great success.
We'd have to work, I would say we'd have to work with private property owners, but
Yep.
we're finding more and more of them are interested in.
They are.
Yeah, and so there's an attitude mindset that's actually changed quite a bit.
Yep, and in fact, just as a side note here, I was on Monday, I was given a presentation in the city of Albany because we're protecting significant habitat, riparian wildlife, and wetlands down there, and do have a lot of support from the public in saving these areas. They realize, these areas in the urban growth boundaries are disappearing, so it's encouraging.
Any other comments or questions?
I think Mr. Crusher also.
Oh, Ms. Crusher?
Commissioner, Chair Slack, I just wanted to mention that we have a document that's readily available, which is our TMDL plan for temperature. It's part of our National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System permit, and we have maps, priority areas where we need trees planted to provide shade throughout the city. So if that was something that anyone decided to pursue, we're always very anxious to work with developers or anybody to help us implement that plan.
Commissioner Neely.
I'm going to tell you that the project proceeds and these trees get cut down, and that you will hear from the public. We heard from it on the Willamette River. I can guarantee you're going to hear from it. So you got to be prepared for that reaction, and just letting you know.
Commissioner Neely. I thought you're just playing with your pen? Nisita. That's right. I'm sorry. I had a brain block there.
All us ends are like.
Our city manager has a saying that I'm fond of, and that is, I'm going to push back a little bit. First, regarding Randy's statement about the one tree width, even on this photograph, there's something I think is very telling. Although it's only one tree width, you can see that the only shade you can see on that photograph is the very extensive shade that one tree width of cottonwoods is providing on the east side of the cove at that point that photograph is taken. Secondly, regarding the quote-unquote degraded condition of the habitat, what our standards count as degraded include things like the presence of non-native species in ground cover, et cetera. Whether, there's Scotch broom or English ivy or Himalayan blackberry, at ground level may make the habitat degraded, but that doesn't mean that the cottonwoods in that so-called degraded habitat are providing any less shade to the east bank, to the east shoreline of the cove. Finally, I would like to make what I hope is a constructive criticism of your report that you submitted as part of the Planning Commission application of this project, which I've read with some care. I don't think this report really meets the code requirements. And I will point specifically to sections 7, 8, and 9. The analysis required is to impacts of the proposed development may have on the water quality resource area. If folks read those sections, the only impacts discussed are the building footprints within the already reduced buffer area of our water quality resource area code. This report says absolutely nothing about the grading and of the slope to make it a less steep slope has on the habitat of the water resource, namely the cove and its temperature itself. That's an impact. That's not discussed in your report, because the grading that's going to take place in the cove development will remove all of those trees, and the report doesn't mention anything about the extensive grading and doesn't even treat the grading and the concomitant tree removal that's going to take place as an impact. So I don't personally, I don't think that meets the requirements of our code. Should this development have to go through another land use approval because it's changed extensively, and I understand that's in the works, I hope that you will take more care in reading those sections and making factual findings on what constitutes impacts by this project, and particularly the grading and associated tree removal, particularly on the east side and south side of the cove. Thanks.
Anything else?
We would be happy to sit down with Todd and anybody else who would be interested and look at different mitigation possibilities. Our intent is to do a good job to improve water quality. We're doing a number of things already toward that end. The height of the condominium buildings are going to make some pretty big shadows, and probably some of those will be down on the water as well. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Norris.
I-
Commissioner Neely. Commissioner Norris.
I think that's it. I think that's, yoo-hoo. I think that's a great, just wait for the mic to come on. I think that's a great idea. Since we're so time limited, I feel like we haven't gotten over this, and so between now and the next meeting, I would really like to see what you've done to work together and I think further enlighten us, since I feel like we've not quite gotten there tonight. So I encourage staff to work with all parties.
Commissioner Neely, did you have something?
He was giving it.
No, I just made.
Okay.
He was being funny.
I was just making the comment. He should have taken this picture in the afternoon instead of the morning.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to the next agenda item unless there's anything else.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have a couple of public comments. Oh, that's 3C. 3A, Ben, can't read the writer, Meyer? Okay. 3 minutes? You have 3 minutes?
Chair Slack, Commissioners, my name is Ben Meyer. I'm with the National Marine Fisheries Service. I'm Chief of the Habitat Branch for the Willamette Basin, and I wanted to come tonight and just kind of weigh in a little bit from our perspective as a resource agency in charge of endangered species. Salmonids in particular, we do have some green sturgeon that occur in the Willamette River, and we're currently looking at listing Eulicon in the mainstem Columbia. Fortunately, they aren't in the cove in here in this process. Todd gave a pretty good overall representation of what our concerns can conceivably be about this project. Riparian areas are extremely important to salmonids, shallow water habitat in general. The cove here, not necessarily just for the species that occur in the Clackamas River, but also all the fish that come up from the upper Willamette River all look for the shallow water habitat during their out-migration time and during the winter time. So this backwater areas that are very highly limited in the lower Willamette are extremely important. Not the best quality, and we're trying to work on that and work with Superfund processes and all the other stuff that's ongoing down through here. But these are all highly critical areas that we are fast losing as we urbanize. Consequently, these particular areas are extremely important, and keeping them as intact as we can is very important. You can plant trees, but as Todd mentioned, you're looking at roughly 40, 50, 60 years before you reach that height, so you lose all the benefit during that time frame. So it's a tough deal. It's one of those things that you have to really be concerned about and really take a hard look at how you do these things. We can find ways to work through the process and get them all put together and do things, build places, get urban renewal going, but we also need to take a look at what we do with the resources and protect the fish in the process. So I was encouraged to hear the developers wanting to sit down and talk with everybody. My agency is more than willing to sit down with the folks and talk with them as they go forward, but we got to get invited to the table to be able to talk with them. So that's a good thing that he offered up with that, and I'll coordinate with Todd and see if we can get into the loop also and help guide this thing through and see if we can get it going.
Okay, so I have a question. You are representing your agency rather than yourself personally tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And do we have any questions or comments? Well, we look forward to. Were you going to say something, Mr. Patterson? Okay, we look forward to any assistance you can give us to make this all work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, now can we move on to the next? We have so much to do tonight, and I really want to have sensitivity to the grant folks. The policy issues, do I have consensus that it's okay to move that to the next? Good.
Yes.
The grant application process.
Could we move that?
Can we move that to the next time?
Fine with me.
Is that okay?
Yes.
And go on to the grant people who have come. Because we do have a budget session that we need to get in tonight as well. Commissioner West.
Maybe that grant, am I on? Yeah, the grant application process could be saved for when the design standards are in, and we can go through it all and maybe meld those two documents.
Okay. Let's take a look at 3D, grant match applications for 701 Main. Sorry. Commissioner Proctor.
Yeah, I have an immediate conflict of interest on this particular grant match application, so I will excuse myself outside, and when it's done, I'll rejoin.
Okay. Commissioner Nacita.
I have a question. And maybe Ms. Crosshauer can answer this because her memo is and its attachments is what raised the question in my mind. This is a very detailed process and requirements. When was this adopted? Was it adopted officially by the Urban Renewal Agency or the Urban Renewal Commission, and when?
Well, I don't remember when. Anybody?
Last winter?
I think it was long before that. Well, is it that recent? A year?
Because we modified it after some previous concerns of mine, that it was kind of vague.
Okay, because the reason I raised this is I had asked and expressed frustration in recent meetings at not having any criteria to go by in awarding grant applications, and this is the kind of thing that I was exactly looking for, and I have to express my frustration at not having received this early on in my appointment onto this Urban Renewal Commission, and the fact that we awarded some grants
and there are more than a few of us who are new, and we don't even seem to have been granted previous grants by comparing the grant application to these specific standards. I'm very confused as to why that happened.
Okay. Can we discuss that later? As I say, we're really in a crunch here, and it might be good to discuss that at the next meeting. Commissioner
I have the same concerns, but I understand the need to talk about the grants. I think some of this question affects a lot of the grants this evening tonight as well, and so I understand that we want to get to making those decisions, but I think it will affect my decision on most every one of these applications tonight.
Commissioner Shaw.
We may have some housekeeping issues to take care of here, but I don't know if we should take that out on these applications that have already followed the rules to get here tonight. So.
Well, my concern is that most of the applications tonight include items that make the grants ineligible for grants, according to our process and requirements that we've been received.
Should we go through them one by one?
We have to.
Okay.
I don't know what you're speaking to.
You want to do the first one there, Commissioner Smith? Did you want to talk about your list?
Oh, well, we're going to go
Is that
with the
what-
first one?
I
Okay,
think
well,
we meant grant.
Oh, I thought you meant these
start with
Oh, I'm
questions.
sorry, just go do it. He can
Okay, I'm
voice
sorry.
as the
All
grant.
right. Okay, let's do the first grant, 701 Main.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners and Chair Slack. One thing I did want to point to on the agenda item 3C is you had asked for a summary of the grant activity, and that is included in that memo. Well, I think this is actually, we have some pretty exciting activities going on down on Main Street and in the downtown urban renewal district because of the flurry of grant applications. And the first one you're looking at is at 701 Main Street. And this is, I think everybody knows Mi Familia, the restaurant that has fabulous pizza and lasagna and salads. Speaking from experience. And they are asking for a grant to construct a deck at the back of their building, which is visible from underneath the bridge and from the bridge itself. So they are asking for a grant of $4,665, and we reviewed it. They provided all the information required. We did have some conclusions, which are noted in the packet, and then we had also requested that Christina Robertson Gardner provide us with some specific conditions, and she has done that, so I would add to, in addition to the conclusions that we reached on page 3 of 3, she's recommending that we have, if there's any, all visible pressure-treated wood shall be wrapped, all visible wood shall be finished, the deck shall be skirted on all visible sides, and the deck shall be made of cedar, fir, or spruce, and shall be stained to protect the life of the deck. With the exception of cedar decks, they're not required to be stained. If an alternate synthetic deck material is proposed, it shall be reviewed by planning staff to determine if it is appropriate for the commercial district. And then she also recommends that we require that landscaping pots or vines shall be utilized to soften the impact the deck has on the view from the bridge and Highway 99E. We also have, let me see, yeah, Patricia is here too. She may want to say some more, or maybe you just want to ask questions of her or myself.
Okay. Commissioner West.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you're going to use cedar. Did I hear clear cedar or number 2 cedar? Or that will be required, because I was questioning the putting money into pressure-treated wood. And my only other question is, on as far as a safety point of view, are you adding any lighting? And are there any codes for, lighting outside on a deck of a commercial structure?
We did not inquire about that, and I don't think building put anything that either about that. So, to my best of my knowledge, there wouldn't be any requirements, and you could ask Patty if she's intending to add any language.
Christina?
Christina, are you trying to come up?
You're coming up here. Come up, please. Thank you.
Chair Slack, this potentially may need to go through minor site plan, and through the minor site plan review, we'll take a look to see if any lighting may need to be added as part of the site plan.
Okay. Commissioner Neely?
Just a follow-up, I mean, lighting, I presume, would be dependent upon when the deck is open. I mean,
Yeah.
if they're not, if it's not going to be open at night,
Right.
then I don't know if there's any reason for the lighting.
And that's what we'll have to take a look through our code
Yeah.
to see what, based on where it is,
Yeah.
if any pedestrian lighting will be required.
I'm sure if they want to use the deck at night, they're going to put lights up there.
Well, no, I think what site plan design review will may put limits on the minimum or maximum
Oh, I
light
see.
foot candles of the
Okay,
light.
Commissioner Walters, hi.
I have an accounting issue, or a question, I guess I should say. Looking at the list of projects, are we concerned about the award dates as far as sticking within our $100,000 budget? Or how does this work as far as, are we looking at the actual disbursement dates, or?
As far as the budget impact
Yeah.
is concerned?
Yeah, because it looks to me like we have, starting from 8/20/08 would be the July 1 budget period for the 2009 fiscal year. And I'm just trying to figure out if we have the money to pay for these projects, or if we have to make a decision on which ones we can afford.
To the best of my knowledge, that the amount paid out yet is under the budget through June 30th, and then additional money has been budgeted for next year. So my suggestion would be that many of these won't be paid out until next.
So are we going
budget
according
year.
to commitments or expenditures as far as where we are in the budget cycle?
We would want to go by, you'd look at both. And you don't want to not be able to meet your budget for the end of next year. So I would suggest that you look at this year's budget and next year's budget. And as time goes on, you wouldn't want to get to the end of next year's budget. And of course, it's not been adopted yet.
Mr. Patterson, do dollars carry over if we haven't used them from one budget year to the next?
That is your beginning fund balance. And as you
Okay.
recall, you have $4.8 million. So if you do not spend it this year, it will roll over as part of that balance. Now, you'd have to appropriate that down into the line item that you're expending it for.
Would it be possible for us to get some kind of a report that would show our commitments and our expenditures?
Well, the other thing you have to keep in mind, with all the expenditures, if you're looking at next year's budget, and so therefore if this rolls over, you only have a $28,000 contingency down there. So that's the only amount. So, yeah, you have to kind of balance what you're spending here.
Do we have anything that's not included on this list that we still have committed funds for?
I'd have to defer that to Ms. Crushhour.
Hang on a second. Let's see. So what this is showing, there's no other grants that aren't on this list that we've committed to. Is that what you're asking?
Right. So if we look at the amount paid, we've got $40,000.
Correct.
But if you look at the potential, I guess, just looking at if you take $40,000, it gives us $10,000 grants, and we've got more than 6 here that are not,
Haven't funded?
that haven't been paid yet, or haven't been applied for, and I'm just wondering what our balance is in the account.
What I see is we've paid out $40,000, and we are committed to $80,000. So you would have to keep in my view, that there's $40,000 that are already committed to.
So
The net, I'm sorry, the net, that hasn't been paid out yet, but is committed to.
So we basically have $60,000 available, or, no, wait, we've paid $80,000 already, and we have
we've
another
paid
40. So we're at 120 already?
No, we've awarded $80,000 and we've paid $40,000.
Oh, okay, so,
40,000.
so we're at $80,000 commitment.
Right.
And if we wanted to stay within our budget allowance for this fiscal year, we would want to only award $20,000 more projects.
Yeah.
Unless
Assuming
we
these
move
are
it
gonna
in,
come
unless
back
we move it
in.
into the next year.
Right.
Okay.
Because some of these may not be done
Right,
by.
okay, thank
yeah.
you.
Commissioner Smith?
In terms of the visibility, I actually went down there. Yes, it is a great restaurant. Love the place. I don't know that it really necessarily fits the criteria in terms of visibility. You're talking about a sidewalk that is 2 feet that goes down an alley on the side of the bridge. You can't see it from your car going over the bridge. You can, however, see it if you walk on foot across the bridge. But also, we have to take into consideration for the next multiple years, the bridge won't even be open. You can't see it from Main Street. You can't see it from McLaughlin Boulevard. It's probably the worst possible place for a project in terms of visibility, so that's a concern. Another ineligible item is fencing, and it calls for fencing around the deck, which not only blocks visibility even more, but is an element in itself that's not eligible for a grant. So those are some concerns on that. The other question I have, which could be probably dealt with later, is my concern about the questions regarding buildings on historic register or within the historic overlay. It says, is this building on the local historic register or within the historic overlay district? And it was answered no. I can't imagine. There's very few buildings on Main Street that have this is about one of the most historic buildings on Main Street. Built in 1895. It was the daughter of Dr. Barclay who owned the building originally, and then it was owned by a senator in the early 1900s. So my concern with this is we all appreciate the historic value of our downtown. We all also want to support these brand new businesses and keep them open and revitalize our downtown. But I hate to see us, while we're revitalizing downtown, killing its historic nature. And I think we've seen that with some of the revitalization of some of the commercial buildings downtown that have enormous historical value and now look like brand new buildings.
Commissioner Norris?
Commissioner Smith has addressed my question about the improvements not visible from public streets and sidewalks being an ineligible improvement. If that weren't there, it would be a great project, because it's partly its front side and its isolation makes it a nice little area, but that is a question for me. And then also, how, under Christina's remarks, how are we addressing the concern about the parking requirements, since it takes out parking places, reducing that from 3 to 1? How are we addressing that? Or this hasn't gone through planning yet, so we have this piece
Yeah,
missing.
if it goes through minor site plan design review, that's when they would address the parking issue.
So if we award this, it would be contingent on all of those.
They're all contingent on receiving the appropriate city permits. Yeah. And regarding the visibility, I think we were, staff doesn't, we go over these with a very generous eye, because we feel like this is part of the economic development. It really is the commission's decision to do what they see fit with the grant money. We found that this deck will be visible by the pedestrian, and regarding the closure of the bridge or not, the bridge will be back open again, and this will be still be hopefully a very fabulous restaurant. So we looked at it from the pedestrian standpoint, not just a vehicle.
Commissioner Neely.
I believe I recently, the last time I've been at a public meeting, raised this particular point that I think we have an excellent opportunity with the bridge project that those two vehicular lines that come on either roads, alleys, or whatever you want to call them, that come on either side of the bridge, they are poor transportation routes for automobiles. I think they should be. I think it'd be great pedestrian routes. I'm talking about that as being a major access point to get down from the river from the elevator. So in terms of future visibility, I personally feel it'd be a great spot. I do have a concern, however, about the fencing material, because that will inhibit. And I don't know if anybody wants, if staff wants to respond to that particular point.
Well, I would say that the fencing on the deck, that you might want to ask the applicant about that.
Yeah.
From our perspective, when I think of fencing, I more think of like fencing on a property line.
Yeah, I don't know that she means by that either.
Not necessarily surrounding a space.
Tricia, did you want to come up
But
and...
that's something I think you really...
Except that deals in part with the visibility issue.
Well, yeah,
Come on up, Patricia.
like McMinimum's is...
We just, we need
Yeah.
fenced, but you don't notice it.
you to state your name and the city you reside in.
My name is Patricia Eddy.
Into the microphone there, please.
My name is Patricia Eddy, and I reside in Oregon City, and I'm one of the owners of Mi Familia. I can actually address several of these issues. Number one, when we first started the restaurant, I inquired into the historic value of the building and was told it was not on the registered list because the building has actually been modified. It has been stuccoed, and so it's not considered a registered historic building. That's what I was told by the city. Number two, the visibility from the street. That is a very highly used sidewalk and alleyway down to the river, and it's, I believe that we would have great visibility of the deck for that restaurant, particularly when the bridge closes and all the modifications that are going on downtown. There is a very high level of pedestrian activity down there. The fencing, I'm totally clueless about that. I never requested fencing. I thought they may be talking about the actual railing around the deck being more fenced in, kind of like the McMinnon style.
Okay.
of decking.
Well, that's totally different.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're talking about, because we never requested fencing or...
No, it calls it the fence company. It's just confusing.
Oh, it's just one of the bids that we had is called the fence company, but...
For the deck.
We are not requesting fence around there. Yeah. Our plans are to make it extremely aesthetic, lots of plants and umbrellas, and because you don't actually have a direct view of the river, you have a kind of ugly view of the hooded parking lot behind us. But we'll have a phenomenal view of the bridge when it's under rehab. So,
Okay. Commissioner Nocita?
As someone who very fondly remembers his Italian grandfather's accent, I, for one, am really appreciative of having an Italian restaurant in Oregon City.
Thank you.
Having said that, however, I really struggle with this because from just the text of these requirements, I just can't make the stretch that this is eligible. It really is a non-facade improvement. I do think the fencing is not eligible, and I'm with you, but I just can't get there. I'm sorry.
Okay, any other, Commissioner Smith?
One of the things that I highlighted here that I forgot to mention was this is the third grant request. One of the grant requests included a new back door, a stairway, and a landing, which will be erased by this new grant.
That's when we
says
originally
on-
rehabbed the building.
Right.
Yeah.
But
because it
a
was-
previous grant paid for the new landing and the back door stairway, which I concede is not very much. It probably multiple couple $100 maybe, but in a sense, money that we've already given for part of a previous project will be taken away when this new deck is put in.
So the door won't be there anymore?
Well, the door will. I'm
Oh.
saying the landing and the stairs.
Okay. I'm just wanting to know what you meant by that. So.
Yeah,
It-
well, I guess suppose we could reuse the majority of that. It's, we're just extending it out, so.
Do we have any other?
I'm going to put forward a motion to
Yes.
actually grant the $4,665.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have discussion. We have a roll call?
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Could we please ask that the Christina Robertson Gardner's criteria be added regarding the type of materials used on the deck?
So moved.
Is the second okay with that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any other discussion?
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Nasita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
No.
Commissioner Shaw?
No.
Commissioner, Chair Slack?
Yes. Okay.
What
Sir?
was your announcement?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. What was the count?
We have 3 from the City Commission voting yes, and we have 2 from the citizen group of Urban Renewal Commissioners voting yes.
And 3 voting no?
If-
4 voting no, so it's 5-4? And the motion passes.
May I ask, is there, I forgot actually whether there's a requirement of city and non-city.
Only for
the quorum.
Just a
quorum.
quorum.
Yeah.
It's simple majority
So I
beyond
don't know
that.
if we have to have that information.
No, we don't have to have that.
No.
information.
Thank you. 1200 Main.
This is another project that is, this one has a bit of an unusual component. Most of you know this is Hoagie's, which is down at 12th and Main, and 12th Street is going to be connecting to McLaughlin Boulevard at the completion of our McLaughlin Boulevard project. And so we're probably going to get a lot more people driving by Hoagie's, so it's pretty darn exciting that they're making some significant improvements to their building downtown. And they're actually renaming it to, I believe, called the Ice House, which has some historic value to what the building was used for in its past. And this is one where they have a whole list of work they're doing. They have the work that they've asked for a $10,000 grant match. And then the city has asked that they replace, they've suggested replacing sidewalks on their 12th Street side of their building, which is a good idea. And they're also doing a lot of window replacement. They're doing painting, all kinds of things. And then what the city's asked, because it's on 12th Street, which is now going to connect between McLaughlin and Washington Street, and we have provided the streetscape on 12th Street as part of our McLaughlin Boulevard project between 9090 and Main Street, we've asked that they continue the street lights and the street trees down 12th Street. Now, that is really it's not something they wanted to do or they suggested, and it also gets to be very expensive. So we're suggesting that for the street lights, that we ask the Urban Renewal Commission to fund those street lights separately from the $10,000 grant, and sort of give more like sort of a public works contribution, a private contribution, and then the rest of their work that they're doing.
Did you fill your complete application out?
Yeah, that's right.
And what we've learned in the past is really there's that $10,000 maximum, but there's also the discretion of the city commission to grant more money. That's happened a couple times in the past, and then this is even a little bit different than that. It's sort of a
I would not want to make that a condition of passing this. And do the conditions actually bring that out? The streetlights?
We say it as that being, if you are in agreement with the city's request, then the work would include that work.
And one thing that this is a far-reaching concept because as a part of the parking study that's in process, lighting down to that parking areas in that end of town is a critical issue that needs to be dealt with. So this, I'm assuming, would be one piece of that puzzle. Commissioner Crocker.
So, just to make sure, and I'm sure you've already gone over this, but if they were to redo the sidewalks, I know that we're looking for maybe some stimulus dollars to redo the sidewalks on Main Street for a big chunk. I imagine
ODOT was doing it.
Or ODOT, yeah. Is there already plans in place so we know exactly what the new sidewalks would look like? So if they were to redo these, it would match perfectly with what would be done in the future?
Well, matching perfectly on Main Street is not possible.
Yeah.
But we do have an idea of what the new sidewalks would look like, and we've walked the sidewalks with the Main Street group several times, and selecting areas that seem to be used quite a few places. And because when we're asking for money from ODOT for the sidewalks, we're not thinking about asking for just redoing everything wholesale downtown.
Why not?
Why not? Because some of them really have more life left in them. And
But in
there's
regards
a certain
to
amount of charm with not having everything be perfect.
in regards to
too.
the design of the tree grates and stuff like that,
Yeah,
it would
and
all
in
be
this case,
consistent.
there would not be grates. We have actually gravel fill in a number, and then on 12th Street, we're using pavers to block the tree well.
Commissioner Smith.
Again, one of the characteristics that makes this project not eligible for grant is sidewalks.
And we've granted sidewalks so many times in the past. I was in a quandary over whether or not perhaps that sidewalks is like pathways through properties. It's, I think that's something that needs more discussion by the Urban Renewal Commission, because we have consistently granted sidewalk replacements.
Commissioner West.
Do we have the price of what the electrical lights will be? Or the street lights?
Yes.
Was that in there?
We have it's approximately $10,000. And that includes the foundations, the electrical, and the streetlights themselves.
Commissioner Neely.
Could somebody point out to me again where the total amount of this is? 30,000, is that correct?
The total amount for the applicant's grant application
No,
was
not the total.
$24,000.
What is it 24,000?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's $10,000 for the electrical and the streetlights.
Well,
It says the approximate value of the proposed improvements is $30,000. Does that include the streetlights?
No, that would be other improvements they're doing in their building.
So not.
Oh, we have the applicant here. I'm so
Would you
sorry.
come forward, please?
I need to remember to bring them up because they know the details they're looking for. I apologize.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Dan Kelly. I live in Oregon City. We're doing a number of things that aren't on the application. We're replacing all the windows. That's a $6,000 item. It's not even listed in there. We're doing stone. We're doing gutters. We're doing window replacements on the back, and that's another $800. It's not in there. So we're spending approximately $20,000 to $25,000 extra on just the exterior. The sidewalks, if you wanted to eliminate that, I have a whole list of things we can put back in.
yeah.
And the inside, we're doing about a $60,000 renovation to the interior also. And the main thing is to make the Main Street facade look a lot better than it does now. Remove the banners, put some nice storefronts in there, make it look like people want to come in. That's, I think, the biggest thing. It just is, it's a little unattractive.
Commissioner Smith.
Can you explain to me what on the last, I think I'm on the last page, RFC concrete estimate number 4. What is smooth floor for overlay and stain shop, and what is interior slab multiple sections? Is that not interior flooring?
That is all interior flooring, but none of that
Which is
in the
also
grant.
makes this
but
grant.
none of that is in the grant application. Just the top
Okay.
4,200 is.
Commissioner
All
West.
the rest is just the interior bid that was part of his bid.
Commissioner West.
because, I don't know if with the Urban Renewal Commission, we have the right to override our grant requirements, but if we don't, I would suggest that I'd like to make a motion to approve this grant and have him, pending upon rechanging the numbers, take out the sidewalks and put in some of your windows, and so it will become eligible. It's just a technicality, and then we can talk about that when we talk about our policy if we want to keep sidewalks in. Sounds like I appreciate all the improvements you're
Sure, thank you.
doing, and that's wonderful.
Commissioner Neely, oh, wait a minute, was that a motion?
That was a motion.
Well, second for discussion.
Okay, now with discussion, Commissioner Neely?
Yeah, I'm still confused here. We've got here an award of $10,000 to the applicant for work totaling, you say 24,000, so 10,000 is part of the 24. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I think Daphne's idea is an excellent one, because I think windows are things that could be are eligible under the grant, and I think we could make that specific change. I think in terms of the requirements of the sidewalks, frankly, that's something that's going to be handled in design review, or not?
No.
No. So it's not a requirement. There's nothing about it. And is lighting itself a requirement? Okay. Yeah. So do you want to make it? You want to go ahead and rephrase that motion, and would you want to deal also then the impacts on the conditions that are recommended? I personally don't feel particularly comfortable using the Urban Renewal Agency under this grant as a basis of looking for $10,000 for the lighting. If we're going to look at something like that, I prefer to if the city wants to make an application, and I don't know if we can, but I think this is bringing something through the back door, and I don't think that we should include that 10,000. But we have conditions 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you want to alter these particular conditions here, specifically to what you recommended, a switch up on your motion. I think your motion's got to be a little bit more specific.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to move approval for a 10,000 grant to Dan and Shannon Kelly for Hoagies, and with the criteria, the 1 through 4 that are listed, in addition to number 5, that we take out the sidewalk bid out of the grant and replace it with a window grant, and we deal with street lighting in another separate process at another time.
Second.
Okay, and Commissioner Smith, I think you were first.
I feel that I can support this absolutely with the changes.
Commissioner Crocker.
Just one other discussion point. So, but the sidewalks would still be redone, is that right? Regardless?
I have the sidewalk scheduled to be tore out tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes, but this,
Right, you wouldn't get reimbursed
But that's
for
just to a section. There's just one section there.
Okay.
And from that section to the existing is where streetlights, trees, and then 2 pieces of that, another street light and another tree, would be in the location that we're replacing.
Here's my comment, and Nancy, I don't know if this would be possible or not, but since we cannot technically grant money for that, can the city pitch in so he can at least lay conduit in there so it would be easy to put the lights in at some point? Can Public Works make that happen? Pitch in, I don't know, a few $100s so the conduit's laid.
It's
so
not a few $100s.
It's not.
The city gets a few $100.
We can see what we can do.
Well,
It's
just so, because if you wanted to do streetlights, then you wouldn't have to tear it up and.
Well, that's the point I was going to make, is that it would be nice to. The street fund does not have any money, but I don't know of a revenue source for this, but the manager and I can talk about it.
Well, it just seems like
to get the stuff in the underground.
it seems like in the big picture, if we want to redo everything, it'd be somewhat
Exactly,
short-sighted
right.
to
And
rip it
that's
up
why
and
we
do it.
included
Just have to
this.
re-rip it up and do it in another year or two. So
We'll take a look and see if we can.
Is there an amendment we can make to the motion that says we can pay up to a certain amount to get it ready for the future?
Well, the seconder would not support it.
The second would not support
yeah,
amendment.
that's
Yeah.
another time and place.
Yeah.
Larry's got a big hat. You told us that before, so.
Yeah, when you turn upside down, you reach in it, you don't find much money.
I think we need to be
Commissioner
careful.
Norris.
I think you need to be careful because he might put gravel in tomorrow when the sidewalk is.
We got gravel going in.
Do we have any other comment? We need to move along. I do want to thank you for what you're doing to make
Yes.
downtown look better,
Thank you.
and we really appreciate that.
I
so.
want to say, it's nice to see some projects coming from the north end.
Yes.
And
Yep,
did we-
yes, very much.
That's a
Yes, and
section.
did we read you're having an open house?
But we haven't
Did we
voted
read
yet,
you're
have we?
having an open house?
We haven't voted.
We haven't voted yet.
Yeah.
So is that just
Okay,
up in the air?
do we have any other discussion?
Is that just up in the air for Larry to magically pull $3,600 out of
Well,
the
they need to
budget?
try to figure out where they're going to get it, so.
Well, let's see what we can do.
Any other comments? We need to vote.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Nasita.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely.
Aye.
Commissioner Norris.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Walters.
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw.
Aye.
Commissioner Crocker.
Aye.
Chair Slack.
Aye. There are 10 of us, right? 10-0? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you for work. That's the area of town we need to have work done in.
No, we have a lot of areas.
That's great.
Okay.
I don't think we have time. We're supposed to be having we're supposed to be going into executive session, so I think we need to probably move to the budget.
Well, we can...
Well, can we deal with these grants? Have we got grant applicants
What
here?
I would recommend that you do, because the executive session is for the city commission meeting,
Yeah.
is let's go ahead and finish the grant. We'll do the budget, and if need be, we can always do the executive session at the end of the
At the
commission
end,
meeting.
okay. Good.
Oh, is that for your?
That's for the
Okay,
city
I'm sorry.
commission.
Okay. Let's do 610 Main Street.
This is down by where we have the new Home Life Furniture business, and actually, it's not that new. They've been there for over a year, or close to a year. And their grant application includes awnings, painting, replacing windows, and installing a new roll-up door. And the total amount for the project is $19,282, and so the grant would be for $9,641. And is the applicant here? Yeah.
Come forward. We need your name and the city you reside in, please.
Robert Wine. I reside in Multnomah County.
Is there anything else we want? You want to add anything to the?
I figured I could let you guys get going.
Okay.
And,
We can get going.
Play defense.
Commissioner Smith.
This one I was really excited about, and I was flipping through the photographs, and I was till I got to the last photograph, and I was kind of wanting some clarification on where did it go now? The photograph that's going towards, here it is. What is this supposed to be showing us?
apparently, our windows were target practice for BB guns or guns before we took possession of the building. So there's actually
This is from inside the building looking out.
and there's actually several holes. I just took one picture.
Okay, so it was this picture itself that triggered something in my mind. And I don't know if everyone else knows what else is along that wall, but I'm hoping that in the repainting of this building that we are not painting over the Barclay mural. Because I cannot support this if the painting of the building does not account for either making sure that mural stays or it was funny that I seemed that every surface of that building there was a picture except for the one area where that mural is, and it just stood out at me. So can you speak to that?
We previously had painted 3 sides of the building, and
Okay.
we've actually already painted this side where the mural's on.
Okay.
So we are.
What murals?
The Barclay.
Barclay,
Dr.
Dr. Barclay mural. Look at it; it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great one.
So you've already painted over it, you say?
We painted the area that he's concerned.
No.
I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
The area that he's concerned
Okay.
about is a side that we've already painted, and we painted around
Oh,
that.
okay, great.
There's no way we would go over that.
Commissioner West.
Be quick here. On the Main Street side of this picture, when I drove by and looked at it today, this awning doesn't come all, or whatever side here, doesn't come all the way to the end of the window. So are you going to readjust that? The awning unit stops 10 feet within or so?
I believe that it's 4 feet further, but it's pretty much replacing exactly what's there and going 4 feet further.
And making it go to the end of the window so it looks
It's not
correct.
completely to the end, but it evens out, because if you look, that doesn't go completely to the end either.
Well, this is like 6 inches or so. That
Right,
wasn't
and
much.
the additional 4 feet on the other side would even out.
Okay.
Or be very close.
Thank you.
Commissioner Crocker.
So you guys already did a bunch of work on this. Did you get a grant for that first part?
We were unaware
of
the grant program at that time.
So you've already done a bunch of work without any grant money, and you're
We have.
looking to do more. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Anything else? We have a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Chair Slack, I move that we give Dennis and Robert Wine $9,641 in renewal grant funds.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nasita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
Chair Slack?
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Again, thank you for what you're doing on the downtown to clean up and whatever. We really appreciate that.
Can you influence the Munoz building a little bit?
Well, it will. It will.
Really appreciate it. Thank
You know, all that stuff puts pressure on the guy next door. So,
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
1316 Washington Street.
The next one you're most familiar with is Tony's Tony's Fish Market. And well, it's Fish Market. And the thing that's unique about this particular grant application is the work has already been done. Is that correct? Yeah. So, but needless to say, she evidently was informed that she could do the work and get reimbursed for it. So we ran her application through as a normal grant application, and it's now in this Renewal Commission's hands.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Penny Petrich. I'm from Oregon City, and that's my husband, Mark. We own Tony's. And when we were told about the grant before we started the project, unfortunately, I misunderstood, and I filled out most of it and handed it in, but I didn't think I could hand in the rest until I proved I had done the project. So the day after we completed our project, I sent the rest in. And then I found out that I wasn't supposed to do that, but the windows had already been put in, and the deck was already in, and I did talk with our builder, and there was another project that we could have, that this is a massive project we're doing, and there's certainly some other outside stuff we could have done and waited, but, you know, we're a business, and as long as we're constructing, we're losing money. And so I just said, well, we'll continue this way and see what happens.
Okay. Commissioner Crocker.
I'm sorry, I've been by there, but I don't specifically
Well, it looks
remember.
really
Are there
great.
after?
It looks great. I will vouch for that.
Are there after
I'm not
pictures
putting
anywhere?
anything in front of the middle.
Or do you guys have an after picture? Is there? I see
I
the
have
before
the
picture.
I have well, we had to find the before picture.
So there's
on
no
our
after
computer.
pictures.
Oh, no, I could have brought an after picture. I'm sorry, I didn't think to do that. It's, but I can go through, if you look at the picture, I can tell you, kind of go through what we did. If you see the lovely football player and all the signs on the side, those are all new windows. All of the blue barriers are still there. Where the front door is now, that is a window. The next bay window is now, I think that's where the big door is. No, I think that's a window also. Then the next bay after that is now a big double open door that you walk into. So there's only one main door at this point. And then after that, the next two are windows. And then we were allowed to add a bit of, we could only add a small amount, but we added a little bit more Fish Market. So there's a window there. And then after that, where you see that kind of that ticky-tack or whatever you call that, what do you call that stuff? Rick-racky stuff? Fencing?
Lattice?
Thank you. Yes, that is now all gone, and there's a flat deck, and what we did is we did cement, but we dyed it and did the stamping. I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but it's really fun. And we stamped that. And then we were going to put an awning over, but I started thinking about us rolling it in and rolling it out. And I knew that after 3 weeks we'd say, I don't know how it happened. So I put in for an awning, but what I did is we did a permanent awning. And that is on Jessica Isaac, it is on her plan that we did change that. So there's a permanent awning above with 3 sky windows. Now, and then the second door to come into the market, you'll have to come onto the deck and turn to go in. And that also is all windows and a big double door. Because I kind of wanted to encourage people to go to the deck because we plan to serve simple foods and stuff. So that's what we did.
We'll just comment, you're not too far away from me. I'm on 12th Street, go by there frequently, and I was real pleased to see the work that you've done there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're
Makes
pretty
it much better.
excited.
Commissioner Smith, I'm sorry.
Well, our children, 2 of our children are going to take it over, so that'll be like, I think, let's see, 4th or 5th generation. So Marco's grandmother started it.
Wow.
You know where the house is, and there was a basement. She just built it out from the basement. Anyway, I'm sorry to get it wrong.
I live on 11th Street,
I know.
and I would second, I would echo exactly what Doug said. In fact, this building, the Hoagie's building, and the Home Life building, I would say would be at the top of my list for buildings that needed the most help. And so it's so nice I really wanted you to know that it's so nice to see that. Is the permanent awning, though, or the permanent canopy for the patio part of the grant?
No.
I think it is because you can put an awning. It had awning written.
No, I mean in terms of our funds for.
Well, the whole thing, we're putting in, the whole thing, the awning and the patio and the windows cost a little over $28,000.
So-
We're
so-
putting in for 10 of that, yes.
Is the cover is part of it. Because my concern with that is it says roofing or part of roofs for part of the facade grant. So that's my dilemma on that portion.
Our windows will meet over the 20, you know.
Their project value is $28,750.
I know, but our requirements say no roofing. So I'm just trying to stick with the requirements and the criteria that I've been given to make
I
decisions.
guess we assumed that was a permanent awning. You make permanent awnings because there's holes that go with it.
Well, I would say that most roofs are permanent.
Most awnings are permanent.
I was going to put a plastic awning, you know, the fiberglass, and we decided to go wood, and that was considered an awning. So I
Right,
think
but
it's an
if it's
Okay,
if
is
it's
the
part
value
of the application, it's not.
is the value of the awning? I mean, it sounds like they're above in values that qualify.
The window
They're
on-
above the 20,000.
Oh,
Without
yeah.
the awning, is that
Oh, yeah, it's
true?
still much more, yes.
So, in essence, whether it counts or not, I don't know it has any bearing. If the items that did count weren't over the 20, then we might have to back some things
The
out.
windows were almost 20.
Commissioner Crocker?
I'm leaning towards getting my vote to do it. I think the one thing we have to be careful of is a precedent for work being done and then people coming back after the fact. So we need to, and I understand there was a misunderstanding, but I'm just raising that as an issue with us. We got to be careful because if we do approve this and somebody else does something and then comes back a month or 2 months later, that we got to be careful. So.
May I just answer
Sure.
that? I did do most of it way before we started any project, including getting everything. I just didn't hand in the last part until it was completed.
So you handed the first part in?
Yeah, I filled in all the other applications and put it in before.
So it was submitted.
I just didn't submit the last part because I thought I had to show that it was done before I submitted the
So did you
last part.
include did the bids, were the bids included in that first part that you submitted then?
No, that's what I included in the second part. That's when I included
Okay, so the bids were brought in after it was all finished.
Yeah, well, I had the bids before, I just didn't submit them.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but I did know about it because Christina had told us when we first applied for just starting to do any of this building. She was the one that let me know about Kathy and everything, so I did do some of the work before.
We got any other, Commissioner Norris?
I'd like to make a motion on this because I also would love to see this project be funded. President, I think is really important. So I think if we make that a part of the motion, that due to misinformation received, a one-time exception is being made for this applicant, and therefore I move that we grant Penny Petridge, 20 Smokehouse, $10,000.
You changed misinformation to misunderstanding. I feel more comfortable.
Misinformation? What did I say?
Misunderstanding.
You said misinformation.
Oh,
I think
misunderstanding.
misunderstanding.
Yes, misunderstanding. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think we
Mr.
also,
Crocker?
we can look too at the bid dates. It does say January 12th and 14th
Right,
and
they're all-
16th, so there's some documentation that
Okay.
it was.
Any other comments? We have a second.
I second it.
We have a second on the motion. Do we have any discussion?
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Rob Crocker.
Rob Crocker.
Okay.
Commissioner Crocker. Anything, any other comments or questions, or ready to vote? Shall we have the vote, please?
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Abstain.
Commissioner Nasita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
Chair Slack?
Aye.
Thank you very
We
much.
got
Thank you, too.
9 yes, 1 extension. I keep getting confused. It must be an age thing, because Commissioner West is sitting down there, so
Yeah,
I don't
she's
feel like
not-
she's one of the
I
commissioners.
know. She needs to change places with Larry.
Yeah, well, we don't feel like it either. Right?
Just wait till we move into the
Moving
new
right along,
chambers.
Mr. Patterson, shall we look at budget?
Yes. Chair Slack, members of the commission, you have in your packet this evening the budget resolution as it was recommended to you by your Urban Renewal Budget Committee, and let me just kind of recap that for you quickly. Looking at revenues first, it is anticipating $1.7 million in property tax collections. It is looking at $101,000 in miscellaneous, which is made up both of rental income at $60,000 and interest at $40,000. You will be you're asking a loan from the city in the amount of $2.5 million. You're anticipating a bond sale of $10 million, and you're beginning the year with a beginning fund balance of $4.8 million, which gives you a total of $19.1 million. And again, I'm rounding all this off. You can see the actual figures in there. The expenses are made up with materials and services at $518,000, and then your capital expenditures at $16.1, and those are comprised of the Amtrak Phase 2 at $1.5 million, your rehab loan program at $100,000, $10,000 for the Ermentinger house. You have the McLaughlin Boulevard enhancement project at $2 million. You have the McLean renovation, which is the City Hall work, at $2.4 million. You have the Cove project at $10 million, and you have the Bluff Promenade at $160,000, which brings, again, the capital to $16.1 million. Additionally, you have $1.6 million in debt service. You have $796,000 in debt service reserve, and you have a contingency of $28,000, which again balances your expenditures with your revenues at $19.1 million. I will indicate, too, a couple of projects, one of them not necessarily urban renewal, but associated with a potential urban renewal project. And again, I want to express my appreciation to Ms. Crushauer and her staff. The mayor has also been actively involved in this, but as you recall, the transportation bill passed. Both houses' legislature has not been signed by the governor yet, but we are anticipating the receipt of $22 million for the interchange at I-205 and 213, the jug handle project. Along with that, you recall, we will be receiving $1 million for the promenade, which we will be leveraging with $160,000. I like those balances. And the one that's not in there as well is $900,000 for the intersection at Warner Milne and Molalla. So Ms. Crushauer has been busy this year.
Yes.
Plus, the transportation bill also contains $649,000 annually for Oregon City as well, based on the population formula. So it's pretty exciting for us.
Commissioner Crocker?
Quick question about the renovations on the McLean Clinic. Have we gotten new bids?
The bids came in today. We had 19 bidders. The bids, I'll say right now, look very favorable. Again, I don't want to give you what the low bid is because we still haven't gone through and analyzed those, and I don't want to give you one number, and if the low bidder doesn't meet everything. I anticipate they will, but we'll have that for you at your next meeting. They do look very favorable, which we hopefully will see some savings
So
here
there might be
before
some
it's
more
done.
money for
Yep.
storefront or street lights.
Well, we'll also have to wait and see again.
Or
It's
conduit,
an
yeah.
older building. When you go through, there's could be some change orders with that, so we'll want to get through that project and see what we end up with. But right now, we're looking like we might have some cost savings before that's said and done.
Commissioner Shaw?
In
Can you put the mic,
We're
please?
borrowing $2.5 million from the city. Is that already accounted for in the city budget? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
It's accounted for in city budget. You'll still have to take action. This is all just budget action at this point. There'll still be action needed to do that, and there is a repayment schedule that has built into our finance plan for urban renewal. We need to either pay that back in 5 years, or you'll have to renew that, but our anticipation right now is we pay that back in 5 years. So we do need to get money back into that fund.
Commissioner Norris?
I just have a correction in the text, and it's
So
been
1 million.
perpetuated twice. So it's in the text on the elevator project. It says the art was funded through donations. There were no donations on the art for the elevator. It was all funded through grants. So I hope when this is repeated that that change can be made. And the grant also paid for some of those other improvements as well, not just the art. But
We can make that change as part of your, if you look at this approval, yeah.
thank you.
Any other?
I can make a motion.
Commissioner Smith?
I have still some major concerns that probably won't allow me to vote in favor of the budget. However, I don't think they'll have any problem passing. I do desperately appreciate Doug Neely's effort to add the Ermitinger House as part of the budget, but I will probably abstain from this vote.
Why?
Because I just stated I have major concerns about some of the major projects within our budget,
Okay, I didn't understand what it was for.
including the City Hall project and the Cove.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion?
I can do that.
Okay.
I move we adopt the urban renewal budget. Oh, yeah, you have to open the public hearing.
Public hearing, I'm sorry. So will you just,
Just say I open the public hearing.
I open the public hearing.
Yeah, ask if there's anyone else.
Anybody have any public comment?
Yeah,
Public
go
hearing is
ahead.
closed. Public hearing is closed. Yeah, that was fun. Commissioner Norris?
I move we adopt the urban renewal budget for the amount of $19,134.
19 million.
Well,
A few zeros.
a little less to work with.
Took care of any funding issues.
There we go. 19,130.
No, no,
19.
19,134,200.
Second.
And there's-
Does the budget include that?
With a change in the text language, the elevator improvement, the art was funded through grant funds.
We have discussion on the motion.
So do you get a second?
No one needs a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I had a second from Commissioner West. But she's sitting outside, so we didn't hear that. Any other discussion, comments? Commissioner Walters?
What is the process for making changes to the budget? Should we decide to do that in a later venue?
Depending on what we're talking about, it would require a supplemental budget process. Again, pretty much what you've gone through this date to get to this point, unless it's something minor, and I think then the Urban Renewal Commission could probably handle that, but I have to look into that. But I think you probably go back through your budget committee. Again, I don't know what you have in mind in terms of changes, but if it's anything significant, you'd want to convene your budget committee, have that discussion, go through a similar process you're going through here.
Oh.
Any other questions or comments? Question?
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Abstain.
Commissioner Nasita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
No.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
And Chair Slack?
Yes, and what was the count on that?
7 yes, 2 no, 1 abstain.
7 yes, 2 no, 1 abstain, motion passes. Commissioner West?
I was just wondering why Commissioner Nasita and Commissioner Shaw voted no. Just explain their no vote.
I have a little problem borrowing money from the city at this point, even regardless if it's already built in or we got to pay it back and stuff, especially when, there's comments in the paper says the city's going broke and where's this money going? Things like that. That happened a few weeks ago. I think there was a...
Not about us.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, but the
Not
city.
going broke.
Actually, it was, I think it was one of our, I think Mr. Patterson, I don't know, that they were talking about the budget, and you said something about that the city was having a problem here financially, just trying to make ends meet here and stuff.
We were discussing the general fund and the implications, again, with the COPS grant and the subsidy, but again, the money that's being borrowed here is not coming from the general fund. So.
And Commissioner Nocita?
It's kind of a combination of both Commissioner Shaw and Commissioner Smith's concerns. I guess my specific project issues are a little different from Commissioner Smith's. I do have problems with codes, as everybody knows. I'm not necessarily opposed to the development of the cove. I do have a problem with the extent of the funding, the public subsidy, the current plans, and I guess I'm in accord with Commissioner Smith on the issues with the City Hall and the Amtrak station.
Thank you.
Comment time? William, we're pushing against the city.
That's for city commission.
Oh, this is city commission. Okay.
Okay.
And did you want to quickly?
hold it.
Okay. And we do have let me just summarize to make sure we're all clear for future agenda items. We want to look at the procurement issue that was raised by Commissioner Walters.
And I trust everyone received the email from Mr. Kabasman, that the memo that talks about procurement process.
Right.
So we'll build from that.
And we're going to look at policy issues the next meeting. And we also are going to get the grant process that we didn't really get into tonight and those issues. Anything else? Go ahead,
Just
Mr.
a couple.
Patterson.
We'll also pick up the demolition question. That's not one that we'll hold. I think, too, and this comes up several times, I think you need to look again at that grant criteria. And I think you need to think in terms of what we're trying to accomplish downtown versus, as Ms. Crushauer said, we try to look at this with as liberal as we can, and again, with the purpose of trying to promote the development of downtown. I think you can draw that so narrow, and I think in some cases, my personal opinion is we've done that to the point, as opposed to trying to find reasons to say yes, we create reasons to say no, and I don't think that's necessarily what we want to do. I think what we really want to gear that more towards, as opposed to this or that type of improvement, is it a quality improvement or not? If it is, I think.
Am I wrong, or I'm thinking that what we're going to do with in joint with Main Street may address some of those issues. I'm hoping so.
I think
okay.
so, but again, I think we need to kind of revise.
And I come away tonight just so excited I can hardly stand it to see the incredible list of improvements downtown. To me, that's just my heart. Great things from my heart, and even to see that corner down there where Tony's is. I mean, we're putting pressure on other parts of that corner to clean up, and I think that's what a lot of this is about. As we begin to see this happen, it's going to be a building kind of thing. So anyway.
I think also and hopefully all of you received the report that Main Street did from the Lakota group. There are some things in there that I think we need to see in the near future how we might do that, just curb appeal type stuff.
Oh,
that
yes.
could really help downtown.
Okay, if we have no other business, the meeting is adjourned.